Welcome to Intellectual Dissatisfaction. We're building this interview series around nonpartisan political journalism, fair questions, concrete answers, and enough detail for voters to make up their own minds. Today, we're speaking with Brian Bengs, an independent candidate for United States Senate. Brian, thanks for being here. I really
Yeah, thanks for
appreciate
the
it.
invite. Yeah.
Our goal today is simple. We want viewers to leave knowing who you are, what you actually want to do in Washington, and how you'd represent South Dakotans. So why don't you take some time right now to just kind of introduce yourself, give us some details on your background, your professional history, and why it is that you're running.
Okay. Well, way back, I grew up in a small town in North Iowa, in a farming community full of retired farmers, and a field literally just right behind my house. And it was a blue collar family. My dad commuted to the next town over, worked in a union position there in a factory. And I grew up delivering newspapers every morning. And in the summers, I would work in the fields doing whatever needed to be done and make some extra cash that way. Graduated from high school in the class of 17, the final graduating class from my high school before it ceased to exist. And I went into the Navy immediately thereafter because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And did my time in the Navy, got out and used the GI Bill and went to college for history and international studies. And then still didn't know what I wanted to do. So went to law school thereafter and had a plan going in, but then the plan changed because of I learned some information midway through. So ultimately went back into the Air Force in the military, thinking I'd do 4 years in the Air Force JAG Corps, and that turned into 2 decades because 9/11 happened, and then the Air Force just kept sending me cool places to do things I never imagined I'd have the chance to do. So during my time in the Air Force picked me to go to back to law school and pick up an advanced degree in international law, and I independently been working on a master's degree in history because I felt like I'd missed out not going to graduate school. So I picked up a master's in history and international law during my time in the Air Force. Got picked to go teach at the Air Force Academy where I taught international law and the law of armed conflict there. And I parlayed that into another job in the Air Force teaching at running the legal education program at the NATO school in Germany. And then when I was ready to retire, I decided that I loved teaching. The Air Force had made me a teacher. So retired to Aberdeen, South Dakota, and got a job teaching criminal justice, homeland security, and government courses there. Did that for a few years. And when my youngest child graduated from high school in Aberdeen, we decided we didn't need to be there anymore. Bought some land in Hot Springs in the other corner of the state. And that's where I am now, living in a camper while my house is being built. Unfortunately, it was supposed to be done last summer. We're hoping that it's done in the very near future. So I was working as a ranger at Wind Cave National Park for a while before I resigned to do this. So there's the long story.
Okay, awesome. I guess one of the things that I just became aware of yesterday, actually, when I did an interview with Julian, one of your uh, competitors here for that Senate seat, he said that you actually ran as a Democrat previously, and now you're, running as an independent. So I guess I'm just curious why that is.
Yeah, I registered as an independent when I turned 18 and been a registered independent for 97% of my life, except for about a 13-month period from the fall of 21 to the fall of 22, when I registered as a Democrat to run because they did not have a candidate to run against the current majority leader of the United States Senate, John Thune. And I was concerned about the direction of the country, still am. That's why I'm running again, and decided that I wanted to be able to say I did my best to try to fix what is going on because I have very real fears for the future of the United States in its current form. And so I contacted the state party and said, hey, would you let me run under your banner as an independent? And they weren't excited, but they didn't say no. But then there's actually a state law that says if you're running as a nominee for a party, you have to be a member of that party. So I think it's probably unconstitutional, but I didn't have the time or the money to fight it. So I went ahead and registered as a Democrat and ran, learned a whole bunch. I thought the system was broken before. Now, having been inside that system, the lessons I learned, it is stupendously broken. I can tell you now. You don't know the half of it unless you've
I
done
bet you I
it.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, That's yeah, I definitely wasn't expecting that. That's interesting. I mean, sometimes it's like even with South Dakota, it's like if you're not a registered, if you're a registered Republican, you can't vote in like the independent or the
Yeah,
Democratic primaries. And I'm just sitting here like, really? Like
yeah.
some of these laws just seem real dumb to me. But all right, well, I guess we'll start with like the first planned question I had for you, and we'll go from there. So you say the two-party system and big money are corrupting Washington. If elected, what is the first reform bill you would introduce, and what would it actually do?
The big problem that we have is that the Supreme Court, which is also corrupted by big money, I would add, has kind of chained us to this dumpster fire of campaign finance that they lit off in 2010, the Citizens United bill. So short of a constitutional amendment, we cannot fix this because the Supreme Court has given us the shaft on this one. But I would highlight the fact that over a century ago, 1907 was the first campaign finance law that just flat prohibited. It didn't say, like, oh, up to a certain amount. It just said you cannot, as a federal candidate, accept money from corporate or banking interests. And that was, of course, immediately challenged in 1916. The Supreme Court at that time ruled that that's not a free speech violation at all. That's fine. So that is the fight, the biggest fight we need to have again, because the money is corrupting, as I said, not only the Congress, but the Supreme Court as well. And you mentioned what I would want to do. So that's what I want to do. Now, can I get that done by myself? Probably not. But I can get some other stuff. There's some fair representation laws, for example, legislation that have been drafted and are kicking around up there already to eliminate, for example, gerrymandering, which is another horrific problem that is growing and getting worse every day that we need to get under control. So, getting the system fixed, it's not really an issue about this policy or that policy. It's an issue about restoring the value of the vote of regular people and minimizing the influence of money.
Gotcha. So, so do you think that corporations in the United States significantly influence our
I'm sorry,
political
I'm having a little
landscape?
problem hearing you. Your volume is cut
All
off.
right. 1 second here. Can you hear me right now?
I can hear you, but I've got my volume max and I can just barely hear you.
All right, here, give me
There it
one
is.
second. All right, good.
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you think that corporations have a significant influence on our politics or
Yeah.
political landscape in the United States? So
Disproportionately.
yeah, sure. So there probably is some type of legislation that could at least, make that significantly less than it currently is. I know a lot of people that talk about trying to get money out of politics, and a lot of people say, "Oh, it can't be done. It can't be done." I mean, you think that that's something that would be, doable if you were to actually get into Congress?
Yeah, from the standpoint of Citizens United opened the floodgates for corporations and everything. So we've got some exceptions in there with dark money being able to go into. You can't take it, like I personally cannot take anything more than the FEC allows.
Hmm.
If I set up a pack, oh yeah, yeah, flow in however much you want to flow in there. So that is a problem unto itself. But Citizens United, from what I understand, can be changed at the state level to minimize or eliminate corporate contributions. It's a state by state process, which is obviously inefficient, but it's better than nothing. And I believe there's an effort in Montana underway to do that already.
Okay.
And South Dakota could do the same thing. But unfortunately, it is a partisan issue because the advocates for big money to get, like, yeah, we should cut their taxes and cut the regulations and do everything. They get big money to advocate for that. And so they're not
Right.
going to change the position to minimize their chances for reelection. So it is a self-feeding cycle that is, it's just corrupt. I'm just going to say it's corrupt. It's legal, but it's corrupt.
So is the goal to like basically remove money entirely from the system, or is it to just minimize the amount and actually put like a
We
real meaningful cap?
well, that's better than nothing. But if you look at the numbers, I think in 2024, the federal, not federal spending, but the spending on elections. So the amount of money that people contributed that was spent by candidates was like 16 to 17 billion with a B dollars on the 2024 elections. So if we gave literally every registered voter in the country $100 allotment and said, hey, candidates, that's all the money that you can get is from registered voters, and they can give it to you in $10 increments. They can give you 100, or they could give you 10 or 20 or whatever. We would come out, I think, literally ahead because we would have government that reflects the will of the people as opposed to the people with the biggest checkbooks that say, you know what, I should be exempt from everything.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I definitely think that that's an area where our country could use some work too. So, um, as an independent senator, who would you caucus with, or would you refuse to caucus with either party?
I get asked this question fairly regularly, and I think it is, I understand why it's asked, but it underestimates the point of running as an independent. So by doing this, I'm picking a harder path by saying I do not pick a team. And then
Mhm.
everybody's asking when they ask the question, you say, so I know you're not picking a team. So which team you picking when you actually get there? Which which is it defeats the point. So I've been in communication. And by the way, I will assert that this is the banner year probably for independence. There is, I'm in a group with, not in a group, but I'm in a discussion group occasionally with independents from other states running for Senate in other states. Dan Osborne in Nebraska, Todd Achilles in Idaho, um, Seth Botner in Montana, Ty Pinkins in Mississippi. So we have discussed this of what would we do, and our plan is if you can just get a handful, just a handful of independents in the Senate, and we could deny the majority to either party as part of an independent caucus, then we become the power block for whatever wants to move through the Senate. So the
Sure.
two major parties could either work together, which would be a win unto itself, I think, and bypass us, or they could go through us. And we're all in agreement that we need structural reforms, not just policy arguments, but
Right.
structural reforms. So the plan is to be part of an independent caucus.
Okay. Well, that actually that leads right into the next question I have. Um, if neither party controlled the Senate without your vote, or you and the other independents, what are your non-negotiables?
As I said, we want structural reforms. So I want a constitutional amendment to be sent out to the states that highlights and offers the voters. And I think there is I'm going to go a little bit crazy here and say, I think there is a plausible argument that if we truly believe that the power of the government comes from the people, that there's been a change in situation since the ratification of the Constitution, where the state legislatures could amend their state constitutions by virtue of just the legislature voting, because the power is vested with them. In the last 75-ish years or so, every single state except one, Delaware, is now required to amend their state constitutions. They have to put it to a vote of the people. So the US Constitution that says, hey, Congress can kick out an amendment for your consideration, state legislatures, we could bypass the state legislatures, I think, if we just send it directly to the residents of each state, because they are the ones that control the Constitution in their states. They should be the ones that control the United States Constitution, voting on behalf of their state. So that is an innovative solution. And that is ideally what I'd want to do, because I would dare the Supreme Court to say, no, no, no. The voters of the states do not have the power to do this. If they are the source of power, they absolutely have that power and it cannot be lost.
Right. Um, so would it be fair to say that you're willing to deny both parties your vote?
Yes, that
Okay.
is not only fair to
Um,
say, that is the strategy. Like, you bring
okay.
me something that is consistent with the principles that I'm advocating, and I'm in. Whether it's from the team red or team blue, I'm a solutions oriented person. If you can make and again, I as an independent, I'm coming with an open mind. If you make a plausible argument and show me the evidence that what I think right now is wrong, I will change my mind. So that is ideally what you'd want. That's the whole point of debate, is like, hey, who made the better argument and made the better case?
Yep.
Yep. If you sell me, I'm with you.
Um, so you said working people and small businesses are getting squeezed while the ultra wealthy benefit from a rigged tax code. What exact tax changes would you vote for?
Well, I would highlight the fact, and if you've been on my website, you've probably noticed as well that from the fiscal year 1998 to 2001, the United States government had a budget surplus and was paying down the debt. And at the end of that period in 2001, Congress was advised, hey, Congress, if things stay the same, you have the option, if should you choose to pursue it, to retire the national debt within the next decade. And instead, Congress said, oh, no, we're taking in too much money. We should cut taxes. So we've had four tax cuts since that period when we had surpluses. At a minimum, I want to restore the tax code that was in effect in 1998.
Okay.
And that to start. And I'd also like to see some excessive wealth taxes in terms of if you have $1 billion or $10 billion or more, we have a national debt problem, and it's largely due to the tax cuts that have allowed you to accumulate that amount of money. So if
Right.
we charge billionaires, let's say, you're one billionaire, you pay 1 or 2 cents per dollar of the value you have. And if you've got 10, 20, 30 billion, you pay 3 cents per dollar. Again, lower than a sales tax. Then we can allocate that money directly to the debt to minimize that because that is a growing problem that we have to face at some point. We can't just keep ignoring it.
Right. Yeah. So are you saying that you want like a wealth tax like that some people have argued in favor of that like essentially, you have to pay a certain percentage on your total wealth all at once, regardless of on top of just like the other taxes that you would normally have to pay?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
let's say if you let's say you're a billionaire, you probably do not get your money from an income like a job. You get your money from capital gains and interest and whatever else. So it's indirect. And if you play it correctly, because there's professionals you can pay, so you won't have any income that is taxable. And there's a lot of billionaires that are that way. So you can just borrow against the assets that you have, and then it's not income, yet you can still live a high class lifestyle, luxury lifestyle. So if you do you own your house, for example?
Yep.
Yeah. So you're paying property tax right now.
Hmm.
And it is not, I know that the counter argument against the wealth tax is that, oh no, it's unrealized income. Well,
Right.
yeah. And right now I'm paying and you're paying, and every resident of South Dakota and in most states pay for the value of their house, a fractional percentage of that every year, even if they bought it, 50 years ago. So if it's increased in value, which houses do, then you pay for the unrealized gains of that just by virtue of having that asset. So I look at a wealth tax the same way as the property tax. Am I happy about paying it every year? No, I'm not. Do I pay it? Yes, I do.
Right, right. Okay, that's interesting. I've never heard anyone put it that way before. Yeah, because that's something I know myself and a lot of other people have said is like, how does that work in practicality? Like, is that, something that's going to, potentially upend, like the stock market? Is it going to upend or put certain businesses under, things like that? So that's an interesting
Well, it's not a
perspective.
business tax per se. I would say it's on individuals. So like
Sure.
Elon Musk, he's got what is he, 600 billion or more, maybe at this point, maybe 700 billion.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It's
Um,
crazy.
So, the Forbes magazine puts out an annual ranking of the richest people in the country or in the United States, and they have whatever method they use because a lot of these assets are hidden and tucked away. South Dakota being a one of the big states to hide away money, for example, from the
Hmm.
tax man and from anybody else. So, if we adopt that method and say, all right, Elon, we estimate you have whatever, $700 billion in assets. And if we charge you 3 cents per dollar above the $10 billion range, you owe us X. And he can come back and say, "Oh no, I don't have 700 billion. Oh, I have $650 billion. You made this mistake here." That's fine. But why should you be allowed to not pay taxes just because of some creative loopholes that you and people like you have paid politicians to put in there?
So the thing, I guess maybe not.
Oh,
Oh,
you're hard to hear again.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me yet?
Just
Here, let's see. Let me just.
there it is. Okay.
Okay, we're good now.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you stop these billionaires that run these massive, international, powerhouses of companies from like passing down those losses to their employees or their customers.
Again, this is not a business tax. This is a an
But if,
asset.
say, like with Elon Musk, right? Like his wealth is generated from his businesses. It's largely held in stock, right?
Yeah.
I mean, seems to be that, a lot of these wealthy individuals who run these massive companies are the billionaires that we're going to be talking about here.
Yeah.
Whether it's, Elon Musk with Tesla and his other companies, or it's some guy who, manages like a fund or whatever. They're always trying to find ways to keep their money. Do you think that it's realistic that they're going to try to pass their own personal losses down to, their employees and stuff like that if they start taking massive hits to their wealth?
Now they will just restructure. That's how it works.
Sure.
So I would point out that if I own stock, let's say I have $10 billion worth of stock in my name, that I would be subject to this tax. I can't have the company like pay that tax for my behalf and pass it along. So that's not really a viable thing. And the way this would change things, for example, if it's better equation, I guess, if we say just about corporate taxes, just a flat corporate tax. Let's say corporate income taxes, we raise corporate income taxes. And what do you get to deduct as a corporation? Well, you get to deduct your costs. And if labor is one of your costs, you can minimize your corporate taxation by paying your labor more, for example. So it's kind of a shell game that goes on with, oh, I have to pay this tax. I don't want to pay this tax. I want to minimize this tax. What can I spend this on that minimizes tax? And again, increasing labor compensation, that's a net positive for me because that's a net positive for us all. If you get paid more, guy who works at wherever place, you're probably not going to just sock it all away. You're going to buy a better house or a nicer car or fix up the house or something like that. So you're going to spend the money that you get as opposed to let's give it all to the billionaires and they'll sock it away wherever they want to sock it away. So it stays in their name and they don't spend it in the economy. Dang it. I'm missing your sound again. Just, just barely.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just one more clarifying question on that topic because I'm actually kind of excited you brought that up because it's something that's pretty interesting to me. So I just want to make sure I understand properly. Is the wealth tax that you're proposing one that's going to only be looking at the actual reported income for these billionaires, considering a lot of their wealth is held in stock of the company they own, right?
That's
Is
why
it?
I analogized it to a house. If I own stock, I own a house. I own them the same way. They're assets in my name. So if I pay taxes on my house for owning my house because my house is worth whatever more, presumably more than what I paid for it years ago, then if I have stock, it's worth more, presumably, or the same, or maybe even less, who knows, than what I paid for it years ago. But it is still an asset worth whatever it's objectively worth. So when it's not income, that's the problem when we talk about income. Regular people are the ones that pay income. If you have a salary or if you have a wage, that you get money, and the government knows because the employer has to report, we paid this person whatever.
Right.
And so that's in the system. When you're a billionaire and you just have stock, I own this and it's worth $50 billion. You're not reporting that anywhere. It's just an asset that's worth $50 billion,
Yep.
like a house.
Right. Okay. No, that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure I understood. Um, no more audio issues at this point in time, right?
We're good right now.
Okay. So you say healthcare is too expensive and too concentrated. What is your actual healthcare plan for South Dakota and then, the country in general?
Well, I would like to see Medicare freed up to operate like Walmart does. So Walmart will use the power of its national presence to demand basically you milk producer, egg producer, or whatever producer, you will give us this price, or we just won't carry your stuff. We'll use a competitor. And generally, we're going to guarantee a high volume. We'll be buying a lot. It's just going to be at a lower market for you, lower premium for you. So if we had freed up Medicare or the government in general, whatever entity we want to have do this, like a bunch of other countries have, to negotiate drug prices with all the pharmaceutical companies and say, but we're going to stop selling that unless you give us this price. That's going to save a lot of money in the pharmaceutical industry. I'm a proponent of a public option. So right now we have the Affordable Care marketplace where you can go and you look from private company A, private company B, private company C, say, oh, we can cover you for whatever the price is. And all of those things have in common is that they are for-profit companies. So the fact that we have, what service do they provide? Well, they tell you which doctors you can go to and they process the paperwork and they tell you that, oh, we're not going to cover that the doctor wants you to have because it costs too much. So their incentive is to deny coverage and maximize profits. Medicare, if you talk to seniors who are actually on Medicare, and that's not perfect, certainly, but they're generally pleased, like, it's not too bad. I like it. So if we allow a buy-in option for people, let's say 30 to 60 years old, and say, we're just going to offer a public option on the Affordable Care Marketplace, and the government does not need to have 10 or 15% profit margin built into what their pricing is. And they can use their market power to negotiate, as I said, better prices and more clarity in pricing and just say, hey, everybody, you can buy into it at this price. And if we wanted to have it incentivized, we could say, oh, it's an income determinant. If you don't make X dollars, your price is lower. So something like that.
Do you think that that would have a like downstream effect where like it might actually, is my audio out again?
Yeah.
How about now?
Okay. There you loud.
Just got to go in and test my mic every so often, apparently. So do you think that that's going to, or that would downstream, like, lower the costs that people are paying privately, as that there's that extra competition there?
That's the whole point of the marketplace that we have now is that you have competition. So if the government steps in as a competitor and just cuts out the say 15% profit margin, it is inherently going to be more competitive. And so your private insurers, which are, I would note, are receiving record profits these days on the marketplace, then they have the choice of not having business, or they can lower their prices to be more competitive, which is the goal of the entire system.
Yep, exactly. No, that makes a lot of sense. I guess one topic that's come up in my most recent interview was rural hospitals. Um, do you have any type of specific plans that you're looking to implement for rural hospitals? Because they've been really struggling as of late, and it seems like a pretty pressing matter. So I was curious.
Yeah, well, I would note that most hospitals, particularly rural hospitals, rely heavily on Medicaid reimbursements because the people in rural areas tend to not be your wealthiest individuals. So they're going to be more likely to be on Medicaid. So the recent Medicaid cuts that Senator Rounds has supported and bragged about are hitting rural hospitals disproportionately harder, and some of them are more likely to close as a result or lose services, which is
Yep.
obviously something as someone who lives in a rural area, we don't want to have happen.
Right.
Now, I've not specifically studied it and come up with a program for that, but the fact that they were keeping the lights on and paying the bills with Medicaid, helping people that couldn't otherwise afford it, and the government stepped in to help them out, the government should be able to step in and help them out because Is it a public good for rural hospitals to operate? I believe it is. Mike Rounds believes it's not, that we should have to drive to the larger metropolitan areas, urban areas, where it's the economy of scale makes it a little bit easier for hospitals to operate there. But that is just, I think it's just wrong. It's immoral. I think I've lost your audio again.
How about now?
There you are. Okay.
Okay. So I guess we can move on to the next topic here. Veterans are central to your campaign and your personal story, as you laid out earlier for us. What are three things you would do in the Senate to improve VA access for South Dakota veterans and, obviously just across the nation?
One of the big things I would note that the VA has been facing for the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years or so is that we were just talking about healthcare and the high cost of that. VA healthcare is perceived by many in the healthcare industry as a cash cow because the government writes the checks and everything, so you get paid. And so if they could just kind of siphon off hospital care from VA facilities to private facilities, woohoo, we got a steady stream of people and we know we're going to get paid because the VA comes with money. So the privatization of the VA is the goal of some. The privatization of the VA is not my goal. My goal is to have a strong functioning VA that serves the veterans in the most efficient way possible, of course. I have nothing but good things to say about my personal experiences going to the VA. That's where I get my health care. And so, in terms of what my priorities are to make sure we are funding it sufficiently, that we have a staff, because right now I go to Hot Springs VA. We lost our doctor sometime last year. One doctor, the one doctor for everybody that goes to the Hot Springs VA, she retired, and I think maybe they have a new one coming in now, but I'm not sure. So we have a staffing problem at a lot of VAs. So we need to have the facilities, make sure they're up to scratch and are competitive, and to have a stable workforce that wants to be there and help out our veteran community. And right now, with the DOE's situation, the VA was set to cut. I think the original number was maybe, oh, we want to cut 80,000. And then there was an outcry of like 80,000 from the VA, you're nuts. And then they backed off that and they said, oh no, we're only going to cut 30,000. And there was still somewhat of an outcry. And then they backed off that and said, like, oh no, no, we're just going to let people resign and retire and move and take different jobs, and we just won't rehire people. So, having worked in the government for a fair amount of time, I know how that works. And is it justifiable? It can be justifiable if you have a good reason for it. But just saying, oh, we're just going to do more with less, at a certain point, you're screwing over the staff that's already there and incentivizing them to leave. And that's not what we need to have happen. So basically, we need somebody that actually cares about the VA mission. Ideally, probably a veteran themselves. Again, I hold myself out as the only veteran running for statewide office right now. Well, I'll take that back. I guess James Bialta is running for the House, Republican challenger. So kudos to him. But yeah, we need to have just competent plan. And we can't have the VA be the result of a tug of war that we have every so often in politics. It should
Right.
not be a partisan issue to take care of veterans.
Yeah.
I want it to be well run, well funded, and well staffed. Basically, that's the answer.
Is there anything specific that you would do for veteran mental health and suicide prevention?
More of what the VA already offers. So there's plenty of programs out there to deal with the PTSD and everything that individuals have coming back from the longest wars that we've ever had.
Hmm.
So there's a variety of programs. I was just talking to a Navy vet a week or two ago, and there's a program, for example, bees for veterans, where they teach you and get you started raising bees and dealing with bees and thinking about them as a thing where you can focus your energy that doesn't matter about the rest of the world. You're just focused on helping the bees and keeping them. That's just one of the examples.
Sure.
There's so many programs out there that could be doing more. So yes, those sorts of things help push
Okay,
them.
great. You talked about protecting family farmers and ranchers from corporate concentration. Um, I guess I just kind of wanted to, maybe dive a little bit deeper into like how hold on one second, sorry. How you would or what you would do about, say, meat packing consolidation.
Yeah, meat packing. I've said this before. The Department of Justice has been asleep at the wheel for decades, not just in meatpacking, but just in general. We have tools that date back over a century. The antitrust laws, they're on the books. The Sherman Antitrust Act, they're on the books to bust up these big monopolistic powers. So in 1903, I want to say, Teddy Roosevelt initiated an antitrust case against a meatpacking case against what was at that time called the Big Six meatpacking companies that controlled 50% of the market. Today, we have four meatpacking companies that control between 80 and 85% of the market. Why do we have that? Well, the Department of Justice lets it slide, and they've let it slide for too long. Somebody needs to kick them in the ass and say, do your damn job. And it should be the administration. And I'll give them credit. From what I understand, they may be talking a little bit about that. But at the same time, I would say, I believe JBS, the Brazilian meat packer, gave a significant amount of money to the administration inaugural fund and has gotten treated reasonably well, even though they're part of the big four.
Right. Um, should Congress strengthen the Packers and Stockyards Act?
Yes, yes, we need to make it more effective for. I've talked to plenty of ranchers and farmers that raise cattle. The problem with the meat packers consolidation is that they can screw the cattle producers on the front end by giving them lower prices using their market power. Again, compare it to Walmart, use their market power to demand lower prices or to just control the market. And then they can jack their prices on the back end and screw the consumers. So I believe the farmers and the ranchers that raise cattle or livestock in general should be able to get a fair price for their goods, for their labor. And if we end up paying a little bit more, I don't mind paying for the farmers to do better. I do mind the corporate middleman screwing us, though. Okay, I think I've lost sound again. Oh, there it is. Okay, good.
We're good. We're good. Okay. Um, next topic. So you support securing the border, I
Yep.
believe, while increasing legal immigration. Is that correct?
Yep.
So what does that mean in terms of like policy? Like, how
Okay.
does that look for you?
Yeah, I will note that the last time the United States had a comprehensive immigration overhaul was the year that Maverick and Goose first felt the need for speed. Do you know when that was?
No, I don't.
Oh, you're too young, I guess. It was 1986.
Yeah, I wasn't born then.
Oh, I'll give you a pass on that one. It
All
was a
right, all right.
great year, though, if you missed it. So 1986 was the last comprehensive immigration reform. And there are two components to immigration reform. And each team likes one half of what needs to be done. So there's the border security part. Team Red is, yeah, border security. And then there's the overhauling the legal immigration system to assess how many numbers we're allowing in, who we're allowing in of those numbers, and the path to citizenship, streamline that process, all that sort of thing. So I'm a proponent of both parts.
Sure.
And I will note that the reason why, because we don't have this thing addressed, there's actually a disincentive to solving this problem because it's not particularly difficult. But is it beneficial if you are running for office to fire up the base and talk about illegal immigration? Yes. So it's
Yeah,
been an issue in 24. It was an issue in 22. It was issue in 20. It was issue in 18. You hear about it, but then you never hear any resolution.
right.
And it's because it wins elections. People
It's a
get
wedge
paid
issue, basically.
about it.
Yeah, right.
So I
Um,
actually want to do something about it.
okay. Yeah. Um, do you think do you think in terms of border security specifically, like we need things like more border patrol agents, e-verify, physical barriers. I mean, do you have, any ideas on that right out the gate?
Yeah, yeah. I've actually written a immigration and citizenship Substack of my own and published it in August of last year. So my thinking, again, I'm coming this from the standpoint of I had a career in the military, and I was looking at physical security at my first base was a missile base in Wyoming, F.E. Warren. So we have ICBMs scattered throughout random rural locations in a variety of states. And you go out there, and there's not an armed guard at every missile location. They're a hardened facility, but they have basically electronic sensors that tell the crew, "Hey, there's somebody at this place," and they have roving security just driving around, ready to respond. Hey, go to this location. So I believe a physical barrier, a fence, is necessary in urban areas that where there's urban areas abutting the border. So Tijuana, um, like there's a Mexican city on one side that abuts the border, and then San Diego on our side. So in urban, densely populated areas, a robust fence is necessary because it's just different. But when you get out in the middle of nowhere, I see that we're apparently building this fence again in the middle of nowhere. A fence by itself, 2,000 years ago, a wall by itself did not matter much because people would go through it, go over it, go under it. What mattered is that you had personnel stationed on that wall.
Yep.
And unless it's the same thing today, you build a fence, unless you have personnel nearby ready to respond, having a fence by itself serves no purpose. It's a minor inconvenience for people looking to get around it. So why not just save the expense of the actual physical fence in these remote areas and just have a sensor every so however far that says, oh, we've got people coming across or cars or whatever. And then you need to have border patrol that are roving like they do in the missile fields, have
Right.
enough people to go, oh, go over there right now. Okay, we'll do that. That is the high tech solution for this thing. That
Sure.
is,
Yeah.
I'm going to say it is cheaper because we're not putting up I don't even know how tall the fence is, 15-foot steel fence.
Right. Yeah. Seems logical. Um, what's one thing that Democrats and then one thing that Republicans got wrong in terms of immigration in the past,
Uh,
say, 4 to 8 years?
well, if we look back to 2024, there was a bipartisan bill negotiated in the Senate that would have addressed a lot of the issues that we're talking about right now. And it was a hardball bill. The Republicans were in the driver's seat, and they got a lot of the security stuff that they wanted, and the Democrats went along with them. And then, of course, it got torpedoed because it's a good election issue, and it didn't go anywhere. And I'll note that we also had another bipartisan agreement on immigration in, I want to say 2013, that got not torpedoed as directly, but effectively the same sort of outcome. So every side, I would say, just needs to be able to cooperate and understand that you're not going to get everything you want.
Right.
If you know exactly, like these are the things, these are my non-negotiables, and here's the other things that I'd like to have, but I could live without. If you go into a negotiation knowing that, then you can get to what you want. So the Democrats gave a little bit in 24, and they got something probably more serious than they wanted. I'm going to say definitely more serious than they wanted, but they could live with it apparently. And the Republicans didn't get exactly what they wanted, but they got a lot of what they wanted. We can do that. We just actually have to have the willingness to compromise and get around the whole hyper partisanship of I'm going to stick it to you. No, you're going to stick it to me. And who's going to get screwed over the worst in the end so I can go back to my base and say, look, I fucked them over. Sorry for
Hmm.
that.
No, it's okay. I mean, it doesn't bother me any. So, yeah, yeah. That's one topic that I almost want to ask every candidate that I interview is like the hyperpartisanship thing because it's
Yeah.
just out of control, to be completely honest with you.
And I would say that is part of the structural issues that the team of independents that I'm working with, we want to address. The incentives right now are for you not to work together, not to do anything. You'll note that basically everything is a party line vote. And if the
Hmm.
party can't deliver it by itself, it does not happen because you're not getting any help from the other side. They will get primaried, they will get labeled all sorts of names. So this is a structural problem that we can't really rely on. Uh, if we only had more team red, or if we only had more team blue, they're not going to fix this problem. The teams are responsible for the problem, and it works for the parties. It just doesn't work for us, the regular folks.
So I guess on that topic,
Okay,
hyperpartisanship. Oh, you can't hear me right now? Here, hold on real
just
quick. I don't understand what's going on. Yeah, we don't really do a lot of Zoom. Here, let's see. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me
still
now?
just okay. That's a little bit better. Yeah.
Better? Yeah, we don't do a lot of Zoom meeting or Zoom interviews, so I apologize for the technical issues we're having. But on that topic of hyperpartisanship, um, it's one thing to look at that problem in our country at the actual government level, like with the politicians themselves and stuff. But I think that issue is way more broad, and it's not just the politicians that are engaged in that hyperpartisanship. And one thing that I think that I personally think, and other people that I talk to believe, is that like social media
Yep.
is a huge, huge driver of that.
Yep.
Now, knowing that, or at least assuming that's the case, do you think there's any reasonable and constitutional um, ways to try to mitigate that?
Yes, the social media allows you and encourages you to get out in front of your base that are following you and say, "Look how I've done to them, and I've called them out, and uh, give me more likes." And that you can translate that to money and attention and everything.
Hmm.
But I've talked to people on the campaign trail, and I've said that the structural problems are a result of the this problem. The dysfunction is a result of the structural problems. And for example, you highlighted one of them right at the start when you talked about, oh, Democrats and Republicans can't vote depending on what they are. So I'm a advocate for the open primaries movement. I'm part of the Veterans for All Voters group that advocates for that as well. And open primaries, I know that we just voted on it in 2024, and it did not pass because both parties came out against it. And you understand why parties come out against it. It's because it diminishes the
Right. Yep.
party influence and power. But
Yep.
open primaries, if we just had a South Dakota primary where everybody registered, as long as you're a registered voter, does not matter what party affiliation, if any, that you have, you get to vote for whatever candidates for everything at the same time. And
Sure.
as an independent, I'm also a proponent of competition. I believe the lack of healthy, good, effective competition is a problem for our economy and for our politics. Both of those things are issues. We talked about the antitrust cases before, lack of competition there. So if we had an open primary system where you had the final four, the top four vote getters, go on to the general election, and you marry that up with a consensus choice or ranked choice voting, so you have competition, more competition, four choices going into the general election, and everybody could say, "Ah, I really like that guy, and this woman is pretty good, but not as good as him, and oh, this guy, he's all right too, and I don't like this guy at all, so I'm not going to vote for him at all." And then they do it like in consensus choice. They would do a head to head for everybody to go, okay, this person's outscored everybody or not, and then you get your winner that way. And it's not necessarily it's called consensus choice because it would be end up being somebody that basically everybody was like, yeah, that's all right. I could live with that. As opposed to, yeah, we're going to burn this all down. And the other side, I'm going to screw them over, which is what we get now with
Yeah.
the voting system that we have now.
All right. Do you I guess I just wanted to before we move on, I know that it's become kind of a concern of a lot of people that the hyperpartisanship and social media are causing problems, and that a lot of people think that we should limit speech on social media platforms. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, is that a viable option in any way, shape, or form?
Not as long as we have the First Amendment, no. I
Okay.
recall when I was teaching Homeland Security, we would talk about terrorism, domestic terrorism, and everything. And one of the points that I always made in class was that you cannot defeat an idea by trying to suppress it. The only way to defeat an idea is with a better idea. And that is the point and the whole theory behind the First Amendment. The problem that we have is connected to all the stuff we just discussed, social media and everything, is that the voters don't demand a civil exchange of ideas. I'm running because of ideas, basically. I'm happy to discuss everything. I would like to have, I participated when I ran in 22 in one debate. John Thune only agreed to one debate,
Hmm.
and I went through the training for the debate, and this was just not a productive. It was better than nothing, but I would rather see a discourse of, say 2 or 3 topics over the course of an hour where the candidates ask each other questions and point to things, as opposed to just a soundbite debate where you get 30 seconds and then we're on to the next thing, and you get another 30 seconds and then we're on to the next thing. Uh,
Right.
that is that is not
It's
of any value.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't provide any value to anyone.
Just
Like,
size your
like,
soundbite and go
yeah,
forward.
yeah, no, yeah, I agree. I guess, see, we're getting a little bit close on time here. Two more questions and then we'll call it good. On abortion, guns, and LGBTQ plus rights, you frame your
Okay,
approach.
save the easy ones for the end, I guess.
Yeah, I know, right? You frame your approach around personal freedom and government restraint. Where exactly would you draw the line in federal law?
Okay, I've called myself a 50% libertarian because I believe everybody should be able to do whatever you want until it impacts somebody else negatively doing the same thing.
Hmm.
So, in terms of what was the first question? Guns? Is that what you?
Yeah, abortion, guns, and LGBTQ plus
Okay,
rights.
I'll go with the easier one, abortion. I think Roe had it right the first time. I do
Sure.
support, to the point of viability, that there's a valid reason at that point for the state to have the ability to say no, except for the health and well-being of the woman. But prior to that, at the first trimester during the Roe standards, it can be a choice, and it should be a
Sure.
choice as decided between the woman and the physician. So I'm good with that part of it. And so I don't think the federal government should have any say in prohibiting that at all.
Okay.
Um, but I would defer to the states.
You would defer to the states at that point. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then guns, I mean, I don't know if you're a 2A guy or kind of
I
what you're.
I've got plenty of guns. I grew up with guns. Excuse me. Can you take them outside? So I grew up with guns, and the factors that are issues for us today, there's two aspects to a weapon that poses the biggest problem. The preferred weapon for mass shootings is, of course, an assault rifle, an AR.
Mhm.
The factors that are prevalent in these weapons, of course, are rapid rate of fire, how quickly can I shoot, and capacity of fire, how many times can I shoot before I have to reload. And for those specific types of weapons, I'm not worried about the hunting rifle or the shotgun or anything like that because it doesn't have those criteria. But for those things, I would like to treat them the same as we treat a car, where you have to have it registered, you have to have it insured, and you have to have a license to use it.
Okay,
So
so not really interested in banning any specific firearm per se or anything like that, but just having some more stringent, requirements to actually be able to own them in the first place.
yeah. So if you have let's say that you have an assault rifle and you have a 12-year-old in your house and you just leave it laying around and they take it one day and go shoot up whoever, then if it's not been secured, if you didn't act responsibly with it, then it is your weapon that was used, so you are responsible for it. So
Sure.
you need to have some insurance for this. And so the insurance companies, basically we're kicking it to the private sector. The insurance companies would be concerned, well, what do you store in this weapon? Who's in your house? Who has access to it? That sort of thing. And if you're not taking good care of it, then the insurance companies are going to say, wow, the insurance that you owe is going to be higher. So it creates a financial incentive for you.
I guess then just to kind of top off that question, the LGBTQ rights, where do you stand on that in terms of like federal intervention?
Federal, again, from the libertarian perspective, the freedom and liberty idea is that if you're not hurting anybody else, do whatever the heck you want to do. So the federal government has no business saying you can't do that. And I would note that the motivators for this are typically pointing to a certain religious text. And if we look at that religious text, when I start seeing people saying we need to criminalize adultery and go after those guys because it's in the Ten Commandments, then we can actually have a talk of like, oh, you're not just a hypocrite.
Gotcha. All right, one last question, and then we'll call it good. At the end of a 6-year Senate term, what measurable results would prove that your independent campaign was more than a protest vote?
Ooh, that is a good question. If we have made headway getting an amendment at least out to the states, whether it goes to the people for a vote or to the legislatures for a vote, I want the effort to be moving forward to fix campaign finance, to fix the structure, gerrymandering, for example, all these sorts of things. So if there's any measurable progress, making sure that American citizens, the right of their individuals, regular folks, to vote is not being impeded and is being respected and empowered more than big money. That would be the single biggest success, I would say, is if your vote mattered.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time, Brian. I appreciate you coming and doing this interview with me. I apologize again for my technical problems I've been having this whole time, but it was really great speaking to you, and yeah, I appreciate your time.
No, thank you. It was a very interesting discussion. So, yeah, a great time.
All right, thanks, Brian.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.